Crimes You Didn't Know Were Committed by Your Favorite Celebrities, Part 6. And today we are going to be talking about Chris Brown. And no, we are not only going to be talking about the case involving Rihanna that we all know about. Because a lot of you like to pretend like that's where his violence ended, and that is not the truth. So let's get into it. Now, starting with the case involving Rihanna, because that's where this downward spiral begins. In 2009, Chris Brown and Rihanna were a power couple set to appear at the Grammys, but neither one of them made it to the ceremony. According to The Guardian, Rihanna canceled her appearance at a pre-Grammy party due to an argument that she got into with Chris Brown regarding text messages with another woman that turned violent. Police reports obtained by CNN reported that Chris Brown punched Rihanna in the eye with his right fist before he drove off in the car, continuing to strike her with his right fist while steering with his left hand. Rihanna was hospitalized and left with very severe facial injuries, and Chris Brown was later arrested and pled guilty to 1 count of felony assault. He was sentenced to 5 years probation, community service, and a year of domestic violence counseling. Now, for the next few years following the assault, it seemed like he was trying to turn his life around and just focus on his music. And his career really didn't seem that affected. In 2011, Rihanna agreed to downgrade the restraining order, and that same year, Chris Brown took home his first Grammy Award for his 4th studio album, Fame. According to ABC News, the day the record was released, Chris Brown was set to appear on Good Morning America to perform one of his hit singles. However, things changed when co-anchor Robin Robbins began asking him questions regarding his relationship with Rihanna ever since she agreed to downgrade the restraining order. Chris Brown became noticeably upset, and following his performance, he stormed off of stage to a dressing room where he ultimately broke a window during a very loud fight. Chris Brown proceeded to exit the dressing room shirtless and run out of the building, resulting in some very infamous paparazzi photos. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Chris Brown had been informed of the questions before the interview, so everyone was extremely shocked by his violent reaction. At a New York nightclub, Chris Brown found himself in a fight with Drake that resulted in at least 5 people leaving injured. Chris Brown and Drake, as well as both of their entourages, threw bottles and glasses at each other during the altercation, ending in a very bloody result. Chris Brown left with a gash on his chin, and according to The Times, it all went down at a birthday party that was thrown for a singer named Neo's manager. Some witnesses say that it started when Chris Brown sent a bottle of champagne to Drake, which Drake then returned. And then other witnesses say that Drake's entourage started the fight by yelling at Chris Brown as he was starting to leave the club. And there were also talks of a possibly derogatory note involving Rihanna being involved, but that was never confirmed nor denied. Drake's camp, however, went on to tell TMZ that the altercation was actually between Chris Brown and Meek Mill. Chris Brown and Drake were sued for $16 million by the nightclub's owners. However, the singers won the lawsuit. And then in 2013, Chris Brown found himself in another physical altercation with Frank Ocean in a recording studio parking lot. According to TMZ, Frank Ocean claimed that the fight started over a parking spot but then escalated when he refused to shake Chris Brown's hand. Frank Ocean claims that Chris Brown punched him in the face, and then 2 of Chris Brown's entourage jumped in, pushed him in a corner, began trying to kick him, called him the F word, a derogatory name for gay people, and even said that Chris Brown allegedly threatened to shoot him. Chris Brown fled the scene before the police arrived, and Frank Ocean was left on a cut on his temple as well as his index finger, but ultimately decided not to press charges. Chris Brown was investigated for misdemeanor battery, but the case was eventually closed. In 2010, Chris Brown had to postpone his European tour due to his entry in the UK being denied due to his violent history. LA Times reports that Chris Brown's probation was reviewed in 2012 because his travel was starting to bring up concerns because he was testing positive for marijuana at his community service. And the district attorney had suspicions that he was faking his community service hours. And then in 2013, Chris Brown's probation was revoked due to a hit-and-run incident in LA. According to the Associated Press, Chris Brown was charged with misdemeanor hit-and-run as well as driving without a license. CNN reported that prosecutors claimed that Chris Brown went ballistic when his Range Rover rear-ended a woman's Mercedes. The charges were eventually dropped. However, Chris Brown was hit with an extra 1,000 hours of community service. In 2013, Chris Brown was arrested with his bodyguard after allegedly punching a fan in the face and allegedly breaking his nose after the fan tried to get in a picture with him. The Washington Post reported that Chris Brown and his bodyguard were both convicted, and the bodyguard spent a year on probation and had to complete 24 hours of community service. However, Chris Brown pled guilty on a lesser charge of misdemeanor assault and was sentenced to a year in prison for violating probation. However, Rolling Stone reported that Chris Brown managed to get 234 days of time previously served and actually served no additional jail time. Now, the same year he allegedly assaulted Frank Ocean and the fan, Chris Brown put himself in rehab. However, CNN reported that Chris Brown was kicked out of rehab after allegedly smashing his mother's car window in during a family session. The window incident earned him 90 days of court-ordered rehab in another facility, and he seemed to be making progress after being diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar disorder. He extended his stay at the facility for an extra 2 months in 2014. However, he was ultimately kicked out for breaking multiple rehab rules. In 2015, Chris was charged with punching a man at a basketball game. However, the charges were dropped. New Year's weekend, he was charged with battering a woman who tried to take his photo, as well as stealing her phone at a Christmas party. Chris went on to tell People magazine that the woman's accusations were unequivocally untrue and that she was actually kicked out for wild behavior. In Denver, Colorado, while filming a music video with French Montana and Fetty Wap, a woman made accusations that she was forcibly thrown off of Chris Brown's tour bus, resulting in her phone being broken. The woman did file a police report for third-degree assault, but she eventually decided to not pursue the case anymore. That same year, Chris Brown was sued by a man named Mike G, a big-time manager who Chris Brown hired in 2012 to help repair his career after the Rihanna assault. And Mike G was suing Chris Brown for assault, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and breach of contract. Mike G claims to not only have helped Chris repair his image, but also helped him seek treatment for his anger and his substance abuse issues. Mike G alleged that Chris Brown locked him in a room and punched him in the face and neck 4 times unprovoked. He was hospitalized for his injuries, and Chris Brown claimed that he fired Mike G for stealing money, and that prompted Mike G to then file a defamation lawsuit against Chris Brown. However, they both settled the matter privately in 2019. Now, this is something that none of you seem to remember, but Chris Brown had a standoff with the SWAT team where he posted Instagram pictures taunting the police as he was locked inside his home. It all started when Bailey Curran, a beauty pageant contestant, called the police and claimed that Chris Brown had pulled a gun on her at a LA mansion party. When police arrived at his home, he allegedly threw a duffel bag full of guns, other weapons, and drugs out of a window, while the police surrounded his house waiting for a warrant. According to TMZ, Chris's entourage began exiting the house one by one. And after 11 hours, police received their warrant, where they were then able to search as well as remove Chris from the property. Chris was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, and the case went nowhere. In 2017, Chris Brown's ex-girlfriend Karrueche won a 5-year restraining order against him after testifying against him in court and sharing threatening text messages and voicemails that Chris Brown had left her. She had also shown proof of him getting aggressive with her over rings that she would not return to him that he had given her as gifts during the relationship. In the text messages and voicemails, he was heard saying things like, "B word, I will beat the S word out of you, and I promise I will make your life hell." Karrueche testified that Chris Brown had told multiple people that he would unalive her, and she believed him because he had already hit her in the stomach multiple times, as well as pushed her downstairs previously. And in 2018, finally taking a break from his violent cycle, he was caught in possession of an illegal capuchin monkey named Fiji that he had posted on his social media accounts with his daughter Royalty. The photo sparked concerns amongst people who were worried about the safety of his then 3-year-old daughter. And they eventually tipped off the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who he then turned the monkey over to, and he was actually facing a year in prison, but he once again avoided consequences. In 2017, Billboard exposed him for having a cocaine addiction that people believe played a part in the next 2 allegations we're going to be talking about. In 2017, Chris allegedly threw a drug-fueled Smex party where a woman alleges to have been raped by his friend, as well as forced to perform fellatio on a woman who was on her monthly cycle at the time. Cops claim to not have been able to tell whether or not the acts were consensual, and Chris handled the matter privately later that year. In 2019, Chris and 2 of his friends were arrested in Paris on alleged grape and narcotics offenses. A woman reports that Chris Brown, his friend, as well as his bodyguard, raped her in the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. However, Chris claimed that she was a liar and he was released without charges. And in 2021, NBC reported that police responded to an argument at Chris Brown's residence where a woman claimed to have been hit by Chris Brown so hard that her weave came undone. However, police report that Chris Brown was not at the residence at the time of their arrival, as if he doesn't have a history of leaving the scene before they arrive. And needless to say, the case went nowhere. Shocker. So I don't know, you guys. Did you know about this?